Well, I'd like to welcome Jesse Steinberg uh, to to this call, and he
Greetings,
is
brother.
a he is a holistic uh, chiropractor and a Reiki Master, and also teaches a Russian breathing technique. And I met Jesse through the Awaken Wholeness Center here in Wakefield, Rhode Island, and we both work out of that space. And I've always been impressed with his knowledge, and also he's an amazing man, great father, and always a pleasure to be around him. And he's been someone I've also been doing some plunging with, cold plunging with the sauna, and one day during our cold plunge, I asked him if he knew what the benefits of this process was, and he rattled off some amazing benefits to it. So I felt like it was important. You've noticed I've been posting a lot on the recent cold plunging and sauna combination I've been doing. So I thought it'd be great to have Jesse on to explain to you what some of the benefits are of that this amazing practice of cold plunging with the combination with the sauna. So welcome, Jesse, and it's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Ed. It's a pleasure to be here. And yes, it's been a pleasure, getting to know you over the years and cold plunging with you, obviously. And yeah, I found out about cold plunging a number of years ago through teaching this Russian breathing system for a dozen years. And of course, people have found ways to use the natural elements wherever they were in the world to the best of their advantage physiologically and in terms of their mind and body and spirit. So in cold places where there's a long, dark winter, people have learned to use that to their advantage, like in Scandinavian nations, in Finland and Russia. So that's kind of how I learned about it. And, my early indoctrination was the cold makes you strong. And I don't disagree with that. That still seems to be as true as anything else. In Russia, they call it tempering, which is a metallurgical term of basically hardening.
Right.
And there is a way that exposure to cold, if you think of times where, whether it's in the winter or you're experiencing a lot of stress, you can't keep your heat and you feel a little less robust. But when you start to do that cold practice, you actually become stronger, more robust, more hardy, more hard, as they say. So it just so happened that there was this perfect opportunity 2 years ago to really dig in, because a friend of mine, a mutual friend of ours, has a sauna right on a lake. And so we said, let's do this. And so we did it. And that first season, truthfully, I didn't really know what I was in for. And we didn't know what we were in for. Like, we knew that we would be okay. But, coming face to face with the cold is a primal stressor. Like, severe cold is a primal stressor. Just to think about, like, cutting out the ice from a lake and going into the water for a length of time. Like, if you really tune into that, that's a total stressor. And so what's that?
I said, we got you back.
Okay. So we had the opportunity to experience that, to kind of go into our own physiological adaptation, our own fear, and to do it in community, which was, in men's community, which was really, really powerful. And then, of course, this year, you've joined us. I know a bunch of people have joined us, and it's been just a really profound thing that's kind of mushroomed and taken off in our community.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually joined you twice last year, actually, but it was the end of, like, you had gone through the whole winter, and the lake had the ice on the lake had just thawed my first time. And at that point, I believe you were going into the cold first before the sauna. I think you had worked up to that, and then I show up and you're like, well, we could go in the sauna first, or we could just go into the lake. And I said, you know what? I'm here. I'm just going to go for it. So that's what I did. And I was so appreciative that this community of men guided me and supported me in that first time, because as you said, there's that primal fear and that breathlessness that takes over, and you all just kind of talk me through it. Just relax, just focus on your breathing. You're not going to die. You just need to just, and for me, it was that mental piece of not panicking and getting over the fear. And then once I dropped into my breath, I was fine, and I absolutely have loved it ever since. So,
yeah, I remember that now that you describe it, and you like that first moment of going into the cold, and we kind of gathered around you and we were like, all right, just relax your breathing, slow it down. As you've been training for years and years, your breath. And so, and then you did it, and it was so triumphant. You were like, yes. And then if I recall, you then carried that forward both with us and in your own way throughout the spring, immersing yourself in cold water whenever you could find it.
Right. Actually, now that I'm talking about it, it's almost like when a baby is born and they come out, and I think that, now that I think of it, that's kind of what it was like. I mean, you got the water element, and
totally
like a rebirth. It's incredible. And the thing that I found after that first experience, and every experience since, is that for me, all thoughts sort of drop away, because all I focus on is my breath and my heartbeat and just being still. And it's such a gift of being in the moment, of being in my own body. And it's just a great practice. I can't say enough about it.
Yeah, I mean, you totally hit the nail on the head, I think, because, they're very cool physiological adaptations. But probably the coolest thing is what you're describing. There's this adaptation of mind and of breath where we find our stillness and our center and our quiet. And in practicing doing that amidst a severe stressor, it's kind of like, when you're working out and you add some extra weight, it's like, that's how you build that capacity to find stillness, quiet, peace, that kind of space within yourself. When you add a stress to it, then you become like really good at it. And then, when someone cuts you off in traffic, you're like, I just submerged in 33-degree water and was cool as a cucumber.
If I could do this, I could do anything. Right.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
So what are some of the physiological responses and benefits of the cold plunging and sauna combination?
Yeah. Okay. There are many. So let's kind of go through it. So one of the really cool benefits of cold immersion from a stress physiology perspective is that a lot of times our stress physiology is kind of broken. The stress system is meant, in a traditional sense, to be able to activate all your reserves to run from a lion. And then if you survive, you're supposed to be able to come back to stillness and calm down. But unfortunately, what happens for us in modern times is, like, as we said, someone cuts you off in traffic, your boss gives you an extra task at work, and then you get a sudden bill, and then you have an argument with your partner. And then we get stressed, and then we come down a little bit, and then we get stressed, and then we come down a little bit, but we never come back to baseline. And it's so important to kind of reset the stress physiology that you have some way of coming back to baseline. Now, for some, that could be meditation, breath work, yoga, any number of things, but the coming back to baseline is profoundly important. And it just so happens that cold exposure is a really phenomenal way to reset that stress response, because when you go into the cold water, you have a massive spike in the stress response, because, as we said, it's a primordial fear of 33-degree water, 30. It's like, okay, so you go in there and you have what's called a cold shock response. The body wants to go into panic. But as you navigate that with your breath and your awareness, as you talked about, you actually allow the body to come back to baseline while you're still under the influence of the stress. And that's how you start to master stress and understand that it's an inner response to the stress and never the outer stress. Because if you can be really calm and still and centered and in control of your breath in the presence of being submerged in water that's in the 30s, you can do anything.
Yeah. And you you had rattled off a litany of physiological responses.
Okay. So
What are some more? Yeah.
Okay, so we have resetting of the stress response.
Mhm.
We have also a really profound thing in the cardiovascular system. It's one of the best cardiovascular exercises there is, because when you go into the cold water, you have a coordinated systemic response in 80,000 miles of blood vessels that brings all the blood to the core, right? Very quickly, all the blood to all around the vital organs, to the brain, protects the core temperature. So that's a systemic, coordinated, coherent response, bring all the blood. So there's neurovascular responses that get toned, 80,000 miles of blood vessels, bring it to the core. And then as you relax into it, now you have coordinated neurovascular responses that allow the blood to perfuse to the periphery, the extremities, and the surface of the body. And in that action, basically you're toning the neurovascular reflexes of 80,000 miles of blood vessels. And there's basically no other way to do that that deeply, encompassing the entirety of the cardiovascular system.
And so is that the contrast of the heat and the cold, or does that response happen when you're in the cold?
That's basically a cold response. Yeah, that's basically a cold response. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's see. Other responses to cold would also be kind of metabolic responses. So, for example, mitochondrial biogenesis. One of the most important things for the body on a cellular level is just maintaining body temperature. So when you put cold stress on the body, you actually strengthen the system. It's innate kind of mitochondrial metabolic stuff, but you strengthen that system, and therefore you need to create more mitochondria. And mitochondria are the source of the battery in our cell. They're where energy comes from in the cell. So you get more mitochondria because the system suddenly has, like if you went to the gym, you're sending your mitochondria to the gym in that you're asking them to keep you warm under really, really cold, brief duration conditions. So mitochondrial biogenesis. And then also there's this shift as you do it persistently, where the body starts to change its body composition. Whereas most of us, we store white fat on the body, excess calories as white fat. But there's a brown fat, which is much more metabolically active and can liberate heat much more rapidly. So if you start doing cold exposure, you'll get a higher proportion of brown fat than white fat. And that's a good thing for health and longevity.
Mm-hmm. Before we started recording, you told a story about Michael Phelps and working out and his caloric intake. Can you relay that story again?
Yeah.
It's a great one.
Yeah, totally. So I remember hearing about this at some point when an early exposure I had to this idea of cold immersion, which is basically that Michael Phelps, in preparing for the Olympics, would eat some ludicrous number of calories per day, 10,000, 12,000, I'm not even sure. And he would then be physically active and training really intensively, but they found that only accounted for half the calories that he was eating. So where did the other half go? The other half went to keeping his body warm, the thermal load of the water, 68 degrees or whatever the Olympic pools are, of keeping his body warm through hours of training in the swimming pool. So then I realized that, we want to be metabolically active. We want to do physical activity for that purpose, but that cold immersion could serve as kind of doubling your metabolic exertion in a given day. So then I said to my father, if you're going to run or go to the gym, do a cold shower, and it's like exercising twice.
So after the run or workout, take a cold shower.
Yeah, after the run or workout, when you're nice and warm, then come to the cold. And that there again, we come back to like the warm. Why was it that, in Finland or Scandinavian countries or Russia, it's crazy cold. So, like going into the cold when it's just really cold, that's hardcore, but there became a long-term practice of creating a really warm room where you could work up a really good sweat with things like, decrease inflammation, increase detoxification, really open up the system in preparation for that cold exposure. So when you use that contrast of heat and cold, you allow yourself to go in the cold more times, and for more amount of times, you can experience that cold shock and cold adaptation. We go in, as you know, 3 to 4 times
right
into the cold, and we stay there for 3 to 4 minutes. And so we can really rack up some time in the cold as that training. And then you can also tolerate more heat. And so yeah, the heat, I suspect that there's like a beautiful physiology and a beautiful kind of metaphor to the heat. And traditionally, heat was used, was created by wood stoves. And there's this beautiful idea that the trees basically are taking sunlight and carbon dioxide, and through a process, they're then creating the wood that is their tree body. And when you burn the wood, you're actually liberating sunlight in the form of the fire. And so, and creating that heat and that light, which you wouldn't have in the middle of really cold, dark winter, you're actually able to absorb some of that sun energy. And that has both metaphorical and real physiological consequences, positive consequences.
Right. And that's been the other beauty of the saunas we've been doing, that it is wood fired. Because all the other saunas I've ever done has been electric, I think it's been. But I love that fact. You're throwing the wood in, you can hear it crackling, and it just, and then you pour the water over it, and the steam rises, and it gets hotter. It's a ritual. It's a amazing ritual, a health ritual that I'm hooked on. I want to do it for the rest of my life. I just feel like it's deeply, deeply detoxifying on many levels, not just physical, but mentally, in connection with the spirit. So awesome. I'd love to have you on again to talk about breathing more, because such a fundamental, it's how we started our life with the breath. So I'd love to have you on again and discuss that further, if you don't mind.
Sure, I'd be happy.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'd be happy.
Awesome. And I'm gonna also include in this post a way that people can get in touch with you if they want, if that's okay.
Sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great, Jesse. I appreciate you coming on and giving us your wisdom. You have plenty of it, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right. Thanks, Ed.
Take
See
care,
you
Jesse.
soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.